Hello everybody, Cathy McLeish back here again with Alcoholism Unpacked. And today I want to talk a little bit about why do we drink? What is underneath that alcoholic drinking that makes drinking our answer? And you know, alcoholic drinking doesn't start out as alcoholic drinking. It starts out, at least for me, as a young woman that went into high school, felt a little bit self-conscious about different things about me as a woman, as a young girl, and maybe alcohol kind of took the edge off, and I learned really quickly that if I drank a drink and it went into my body, into my bloodstream, up to my brain, I could relax. It would lower my inhibitions. I could feel better about the situation I was in, how I showed up, how I acted, and my confidence level went up with the amount of alcohol that I had in my system. I came from like an alcoholic background. I had a grandfather who was alcoholic. I never knew that because my mom never told us that. However, she kind of had these tendencies from being raised in an alcoholic home. And so we were really introduced with the ism long before the alcoholism ever came into my life. I drank all my way into college, and then I was almost an everyday drinker by the time I got into my first marriage. And then I was married to another heavy drinker, and we were full-blown alcoholics before a couple of years of marriage. I believe what happened to me as an alcoholic is I started to drink. I drank more, and then I drank more and more. And maybe, you know, hereditarily, I'm not sure. I don't even know that I want to understand all the biology of it, but I crossed a line and I came to a point where I had to have alcohol. I would take a drink and then I would want another drink and another drink. It's an allergy, it's a craving, it's something going on in my body that is not going on in everybody else's body, and drinking became a necessity. It was also a solution to most every problem I had. If I was in a situation I didn't know how to handle, if I was feeling emotions I didn't want to feel, I would go to a drink. And if you do that day after day, drink after drink, you're gonna cross a line. And I did. And so alcohol became my problem, but it didn't start out being my problem. So I did a little short, it was a 60-second video the other day, and it was about what is the problem underlying our alcoholic drinking, my alcoholic drinking. And you know, a person commented and said, how do we get to the root of these issues? And so I'm just going to share a little bit about that in my own experience. How did I get to the root of my issues so that drinking wasn't my answer any longer, and I could take an alcoholic life that was headed nowhere, that I ended up divorced. I was in an abusive relationship. I was a strong woman that ended up in an abusive relationship, a shell of the woman that I was at one period of my life, and I couldn't even tell you how it happened. I couldn't. And drinking was the only thing that I knew to get through the day and the pain of the way my life had turned out. So how did I get to the bottom of those issues that started me out drinking way back when I first started drinking? I have to tell you, first off, I had no idea that I had any problem other than drinking. I was 27 when I got sober, and I wasn't the brightest crayon in the box, but what I really actually thought is that if I stopped drinking, I would be damn near perfect. That is what I thought when I was living the life of an alcoholic mom who drank every day before her kids got on the school bus. And I drank all day long, most of the day, during the day. And I just had no idea of really what was going on in my life and what was the problem. And one of the things that I did as an alcoholic, and I don't think it's uncommon, is that I put everything out there on everybody else. I blamed everybody and everything for the problems that I had in my life, took no responsibility myself, and totally believed things were not my fault. I was getting a bad break, and if this guy would shape up, and if those kids would behave, and if this job would come through, and if we could make this amount of money between the two of us, everything would be okay. And unbeknownst to me, I was a huge part of the problem. So I get into recovery, and I put down a drink a day at a time, and it's very hard. I never thought it would be that hard. I'm the type of person, though, and I really appreciate this today, that if something comes easy to me, I don't appreciate it. If I get something for nothing, it doesn't mean anything to me. So when I was trying to get sober and white knuckling it every day, hour by hour, half hour at a time, I was crossing days off on the calendar, and I was really feeling like I was accomplishing something, and it was important to me, and I wasn't going to risk it. I wasn't going to go backwards, and I never wanted to do those early days and weeks and months again. So as that cloud started to lift, I could see that if I stopped arguing, a lot of the arguing stopped. If I could see my part in things, I could almost see why you reacted to me the way that you did when I acted like that. If I could show up for somebody and see the appreciation in their eyes, I could almost take responsibility for some of those days that I didn't show up, that I couldn't keep my word. And so through my own vision, through my own willingness to look at myself, I saw about this much of the picture. What really helped me is to invite another woman into my life who had walked the sobriety walk before me, who had years ahead of me living clean and sober without a foggy brain, and had worked on herself to the point where she had a healthy, strong way of living life and dealing with things. And that woman took me under her wing, and she started to teach me a little bit about my journey and myself. And so if certain bad thinking works me into a rut, I'm not going to be able to get myself out of the rut with the same thinking that I have. I'm going to need something from outside of myself to help me to look at things a different way, deal with things a different way, come up with a different idea, look at things from a different perspective. All of that was something I did not know how to do. And I couldn't see the truth about my own life. A big part of alcoholism is denial. And it's a protective mechanism we do so that we don't have to see the truth. And I was the most surprised of all when I got sober and I started to look back at my life and take responsibility for the shape that it was in. I had no idea that I was 50, 60, 70% of the problem in most of the problems that I had in my life. And so how did I find that out? It wasn't like it just dropped on me the moment I put down a drink. I had to work with another person and have them, give them permission, trust them enough to tell me what they saw. And this is the type of thing that it went over periods of weeks and months. And I might have a therapist on the side. I might have a doctor I was talking to too. I might have something going on in my church or in some other social circle where I'm working on myself with other people. I was never limited to one resource. But the one thing that I do encourage anybody that is trying to really make progress in a sober life is to have one person that knows everything about you. And the beauty of that is when I ran into a problem, and in early sobriety I had so many problems because I hadn't dealt with any of my problems. So I had everything in my life kind of upside down, and I had to work my way out of being in debt, working through a divorce, being a single mom, finding a home to rent. All of the things that I had to do, everything was a problem. And I had to have somebody else help me sort out new solutions and new answers to those problems. So having one woman that knew what was going on in my life, knew the players, knew the situation, knew my job, knew my friends, knew my family, every time that I came up with my back up against a wall or hit a brick wall, I could call this person and I didn't have to bring her up to date. I didn't have one person that I called for one answer and another girl I called for another answer. I always went to the same person when I needed direct advice, and they knew everything about me. They started to know how I thought and how I ticked and what my fears were and what my insecurities were. And I did a lot of writing, I did a lot of journaling. I, had to work through a lot of the things that we call resentments if we're actually trying to break down our lives and then build them back up. The things in our lives that have held us back are the things that have happened to us when we were young, when we were, older, when we understood them, when we didn't understand them, when something happened in my little girl, 8-year-old mind tried to make sense of it, and I didn't do it well, and yet I went off into my 10-year-old, 15-year-old, 20-year-old life, and I still had that same thing that I came up with on my own. Maybe it was something my brother said to me in a rage. Maybe it was something that a friend at school said that hurt my feelings. All kinds of things come at us through our life, and it can be minimal or it can be serious. I can be, abandoned by somebody that I thought was really important to me. I can have a situation where I lose somebody that was really important to me, and I don't necessarily know how to deal with it at that point, and it becomes one more thing that I don't want to feel, or I don't want to talk about it, or I don't know how to feel, and I don't know how to talk about it. So it's not that there's any wrongs or rights, it's just that living life is very difficult, and living life with all kinds of people that come from all kinds of upbringings, and they have all their own pains and hurts and joys and victories, and we come at each other, and self-will, we kind of crash sometimes, and damage is done. And so if I don't know how to deal with that, if I don't have other people supporting me, sharing my difficulties, and then laying them out on the table, if I don't have any of that, then I am just going to kind of shove it down like dirt under a rug and go on, and yet nothing's really been taken care of. It's kind of buried alive. And so in my relationships, if I'm not taking care of things, then they're always kind of there in the background, and I start to act and react according to those things that have never been taken care of. And that's where my problems start to pile upon problems. If I've broken a trust with somebody and I have to stack a lie on top of a lie on top of a lie, then I'm going to have more problems in that relationship. And those are the type of things that you get enough of those going on, a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, it's a really good escape to just take a drink and then take another drink and then another drink. And I still can think about it, so I think I'll have another drink. And then alcohol became my answer. And I thought it was the solution. And I started to think less and less about those problems and more about the solution, because that's where I found my escape. So in sobriety, how do I get to those issues? I share with another person. I let them know everything about me. I go back through my life and I talk about the things that I struggled with. Some of the things can be the most small thing. I can give you an example. I was always overweight when I was a child. And back in my era, if you were 10, 15 pounds overweight, you were overweight. So I can remember one day when I was probably 8 years old, I was riding a bike down the street, and we knew all our neighbors. We had paper routes. We just knew all of the neighbors. And one of my neighbors, a man, he was probably in his 50s, maybe he was retired, I don't know, but he called to me and asked me, Cathy, come over here. And so I rode my bike up his driveway, and I wanted to see what he had to say to me. And as an 8-year-old, when I went up on that porch, he said, you know what, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking you should be carrying that bike instead of that bike carrying you. And so what does an 8-year-old do with that? What is an 8-year-old that is taught to respect her elders, to be nice to these old neighbors? What does an 8-year-old child do with that when somebody hurts them like that, directly, on purpose, for no good reason, when they were just riding their bike down the road, having a good day? I don't know. And I didn't know then. And, it was one of those things that I shoved down. And it's not like I didn't think about it. I thought about it a lot because I really didn't understand why somebody would hurt somebody for no reason. Now, I can't say that I wasn't an 8-year-old that went around hurting somebody once in a while. I was 1 in 10 in a family of 12, and there can be a lot of chaos in having 9 siblings. But the kind of hurt that was just one of 1,000 things that this alcoholic to be piled on top of one after another, after another, after another, and then said, I just really don't know how to do this life, so I'm checking out. And in sobriety, one by one, I looked at those things. I put the blame where the blame needed to be. I took care of the things that were my fault. And I started to unpile this big old stack that was over here. And I started to take care of things in a way that gave me peace, in a way that helped me to be able to look at myself in the mirror and say, you're not all that bad. You have really been hard on yourself, and maybe in some instances for good reason, but now you're turning things around. Little by little, you're turning things around. And doing that work made staying away from a drink easier and easier and easier, because I was taking care of this big pile of garbage that I used to drink at. And not all of the things that I had were things that this one woman could take care of with me. And that is the case with almost everybody, I would say, because there are things that we need to talk to a therapist about or a doctor. There are sometimes situations where medication for depression or something like that is necessary. There are occasions where we need to go into different areas and find a specific specialist for that area of my life that I'm struggling with. We did that with finances. We did that with marriage in my second marriage. We spent a lot of time working on our marriage and marriage enrichment programs with different people that knew more and had stronger skills and tools than we did. I found that it's really kind of immature to go through life and think you should have the answer to everything. You should know pretty much everything about all these things you've never done before. Now, when I say that and you hear that, I know it doesn't make sense, but that's what I was doing. That's what I was doing about parenting. That's what I was doing about marriage. That's what I was doing about finances, and everything was struggling. And so when I got to the point where my humility brought me to recovery and I could say, I don't want to die. I don't want to die from drinking every day, from being in situations where I'm risking my life time after time. I don't want to die. Can you help me? And that humility was foundational for me going time and time again outside of myself to say, I don't know how to parent this teenager. I need help. I don't want to ruin my relationship with her. I want to teach her to be a better, stronger woman than I was at her age. Can you help me? Those were the things I learned one at a time, month after month, year after year. And oftentimes I'd go back and check it again and learn a bit more about the same situation or the same relationship. It's a lifetime journey, and anything that is worth anything needs continual work. And by work, I just mean it needs continual attention. I need to be intentional about the areas of my life that I want to keep growing and moving and changing for the better. And so that is why I still use recovery tools. And I was thinking, I probably spend 4, 5, 6 hours of my week using recovery tools, either talking to someone and they're helping me, being in some kind of a group atmosphere where people are talking recovery, talking to another woman and helping her to grow like people did me back in the 90s. And I think about that and I think 6 hours, some people might say, oh, I think that's just another addiction, or that's crazy. Who wants to give 6 hours, to something like that? And I think about it. It's 6 hours of something that continues to make my life better and better. It helps to make me stronger, better in my relationships with my spouse, with my children, in the workplace. Wherever I am, I show up better and stronger, kinder, more compassionate, more understanding, more forgiving. And it's not like I'm perfect or anything. I just have tools I never had before, and they make my life a lot easier. So 6 hours to that is certainly a lot of time better spent than maybe somebody that spends 6 hours on Facebook in a couple of days, or 6 hours scrolling on their phone. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of things that people can be addicted to, and because as a society we accept the fact that you can go into a room of people and 75% of them are on their phones not talking to each other, even though it might even be a family gathering, if we accept it as a whole, then does that make it any less of a problem? And we kind of, surrender to a lot of things that are not good for us. And yes, they may not be on the scale of drinking, drugs, pornography, all the obsessions that, addicts can have, but they still are taking our life out of balance, and they're keeping us from being present in a lot of situations that we need to be present in order to make our relationships and our life the best that it can be. So that's just a little bit about my story and breaking things down. And I know we could go into detail and just maybe take a couple of situations where I worked out things with a sibling, a brother that I wasn't talking to for years. And, I can remember 30 years ago when we made that right, when I said, I am sorry for not allowing you into my life because of how you treated me when I was a child. Those kind of healing situations can happen with parents, with siblings, with children. And I've seen it. I've seen it in a lot of people's lives, and I've seen the beauty of the miracles that can happen when people do the work. So recovery is about work, but recovery is about victory for doing the work. And that is what keeps people doing that work. So thanks for listening. Please subscribe. Come back again. Help me to break down this ignorance about alcoholism that keeps us from getting the help that we need, from understanding the people that we love that may be struggling, and maybe finding out how we can help ourselves and then in turn help the person that is struggling to get on a better path. Thanks again, Cathy McLeish.